Hello, I'm an Spanish native who has been learning English for more than 3 years, Japanese for 14 months, and I'm a calisthenics athlete. These two hobbies are why I want to introduce discipline to language learning. Listening is usually one of the most difficult parts when learning languages. If we're not counting languages that don't have a straightforward reading system like Japanese or Chinese, in this case, probably reading or writing will be more difficult than listening. So I'll explain how I went about listening on both English and Japanese. Although obviously doing pure listening without subtitles will be the best, when learning English and watching TV shows in Netflix or whatever of these streaming apps, I actually never did remove subtitles, so I don't think it's really necessary on that aspect. Taking in account that shows like Vikings and Peaky Blinders are actually really hard to understand without subtitles, so right now I would probably guess that I have an 85 to 90% comprehension without subtitles on those two shows in specific. But I noticed that doesn't reflect in any other type of content. For example, in YouTube videos I have a 99% comprehension. In blogs I have too a 99% comprehension. Even if it's a normal accent from the UK, I have a 99% comprehension as well. So I don't know if I was coping at the moment because I haven't really watched any English shows anymore, but I feel like your comprehension doing pure listening on those two shows does not reflect in real life. With Japanese, I don't know if I'm crazy, but honestly I really feel that listening compared to English is like 10 times easier. If you pronounce a word, you know that for sure is a word you are thinking of. Of course, there's the pitch accent thing, but still, I remember I was reading a book in English and I found this word chasm, and you will actually think that is pronounced like chasm, but no, it is actually chasm, because the person who created English wanted it to be that way, but logically it should be chasm. And there's non-stop examples of this situation in English, while in Japanese I have yet to experience this situation, which I don't really think it's going to happen. Now, using Japanese subtitles on shows while also doing listening actually did worsen a bit my Japanese, which makes sense. So when I started reading in Japanese, I noticed that I knew less readings of kanjis that I thought I knew. Because when you're watching a show, instead of reading something, you need to produce the meaning in order to learn the word. But you don't need to produce it reading, like saying it in your mind, right? Because the person talking in the show or YouTube video has already said the reading. So ironically, just reading along with no audiobook or something like that is improving my listening like crazy. Getting to the point of this section, I think it's fine to use subtitles always if you're learning a language that has the Roman alphabet, that is French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, English, etc. For Japanese and probably Chinese as well, that is languages that don't have a straightforward reading system, at the starting phases I think that you should use subtitles because it gives you just so much more comprehension, and so it will be easier to stick with studying Japanese or Chinese. In my Japanese, I started making the transition to not using subtitles for like 1 or 2 hours a day, and it's not been as awful as I thought it would be. So when I have more than 50 keywords in my Anki, I will probably stop using subtitles depending on how I see the situation. Honestly, I don't want to bullshit you and say here are these 5 tips that will improve your listening like crazy. The best way to improve at it is just doing input without subtitles. However, there's different forms of input which you probably haven't thought about. For English, probably the best habit that I could do was listening to podcasts. So when I search for my calisthenics, I listen to podcasts. Sometimes when I train, I listen to podcasts. So that applies honestly for almost whatever language. For Japanese, you probably don't do this, but it's really great. Doing listening alone with content you have already watched. So when I don't have time to study and I'm doing something else, I put the series that I was watching and I literally just hear it, and it helps you like crazy to go over that material once again and reinforcing it without really being that repetitive, and it's like you're actually watching that show because you already know the scenes and what happens. So it's much more entertaining than just listening to podcasts if you don't like them. By the way, if you have any specific problems and you want to leave it at the comments, honestly I don't have any problems answering it. So that's it for the video. Be sure to give a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to have more discipline and watch learning friends. Thank you very much.